to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of A Well-Designed Business. Today is the first in what will be a series that will take us all the way into 2021, a series on Black Lives Matter with the friends of mine that have been on this podcast since we started 4.5 years ago. And I'm looking forward to sharing this series with you. It will be a chance to talk to the Black designers that have been on our show for the last 4.5 years, not just about their business now, but about their experience and their lives and their personal lives and the way they think and they feel, and giving them a chance to give us some insight into what it really means to have that experience in this country. And I invited Corey Damen Jenkins to be my very first guest. And Corey, hi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I want to share that I asked Corey to be first because I'm excited for this. I have so many friends, black, white, all the different colors from this podcast. But it's a little scary having these conversations, being, the white lady. And, it just is, because I want to make sure that I'm respectful. I want to make sure that I, just show the love that I feel. And I asked you first because I think you know my heart. I think we know each other, and that we truly, you know me, and I trust you to teach me too. So, Corey,
it's all good.
It is all good. And it is all crazy. I have watched you for the last week and a half or so. Of course, I always follow you on Instagram, but the last week and a half, the leader that you are in this, in the world, but especially to our design community, you are really rallying everybody in a thoughtful way, in a kind way, and in an informed way. But it's been eye-opening to understand the level of racism that you have experienced and the level of real pain that you have been, at the hands of. So I don't know where we start. You start, sweetie. You start and you tell us what do we want to talk about now?
It's been a long week.
I
think we're on day 12 at this point in history of the marching and the protests, the peaceful protests over the death of George Floyd. And I think that it has been like a rock that has hit the water in the lake, and the ripple effect has been absolutely tremendous. We talked about this earlier. It reminds me a lot about 2016 when women had enough, and then they started marching around the world. And next thing you know, we saw major changes in terms of our governmental setup throughout the country, as far as women running for office and winning those political races. And so we're seeing the same thing happening now. We're seeing people of all different colors coalescing around Black people. And that's been very heartening to see take place, not only here in the States, but again, around the world. We're seeing marches taking place everywhere. And that's, I think, probably one of the core differences between this special moment that we're witnessing right now versus the first really big special moment, which was back in the 60s when Martin Luther King was marching. Back then, you still had some whites joining the marches, and they were risking their employment, risking their flesh and blood, literally, being so conspicuous with a mostly all Black crowd. Today, The crowds are multi-generational, they're multiracial. In some cases, in some parts of the country, there's more white people marching alongside the Black people than the Black folks that are involved. So I think African Americans are thrilled to see such a swelling of support, a groundswell of support. And I think the key now will be just to keep the conversation going, to keep the momentum going and not let it die out.
That's the thing. It actually feels different. You know, I mean, first of all, I have two observations in my own brain in the last, 10, 12 days. The first observation is it feels different. It does. It's like, oh, yeah, this makes me angrier than anything ever has before. I'm seeing the effect on my daughters and they're, talking about it. But the other observation that I've noticed is that it sounds so stupid, but you shared a story in Facebook about how a woman found you in your Beautiful Homes magazine spread and had a conversation and saw your beautiful work and I love you. This is great. You're the designer. And then you're there and she's just acting so 1960. That's the thing. I'm reading that and I'm like, okay, this is not a movie scene from something in the 60s. I'm like, and that's where my brain is like, Corey Damen has experienced that? And that's where I'm like, oh, and then, okay, welcome to the world, Luann. Where have you been living? And that's crazy.
Yeah, and think about, she did not look me up on the internet. She saw one of my rooms I had designed in print and got my number. I think she had her daughter get my number for her. And so she admitted that she was not technically savvy or internet savvy, that she was just, going by the lead that her daughter had given her to call me. And I have a name that is not very Afrocentric, I suppose. So
right.
And my voice is not necessarily one way or the other. So I think she just assumed that I was white. And then I pulled up there to the house and she had a completely different reaction. She was very upset. She tried her best to contain it, but within 5 minutes, the consultation was over. I asked her if I could use her powder room on the way out the door. And she was like, we have no running water. And I said, wait, you're drinking coffee from a water line from a Keurig machine. You didn't offer me any, by the way, but you don't have running water. And that's when I said to her, I didn't put this part on the Instagram, but I said, you need more than an interior designer. And you also need more than a plumber. And I wish you the best in finding that source of support, because you need support. But what I think what really impacted me, I walked away from that house with tears in my eyes because I had been so excited. We were desperate for new projects because it was just coming out of the recession. And I started thinking, okay, I've done HGTV, I've been successful, I've been published, I have all these things working in our favor, and yet this was a block to my employment at this project. And then I started thinking, okay, well, she did not do her research before she saw me in terms of looking at me online. So this took her by surprise. And then she rejected me based upon this, even though she loved my work. Then I started thinking, how many people out there are not even calling me because they are going to my website and they do see the work and they like what I do, but then they go to my information page and they see me and they say, oh. And I have actually seen on probably 3 or 4 occasions over the last several years, I've seen people working with, I'll be at the Michigan Design Center in Troy, and I'll see designers with their clients. And I find out later these are first-time projects that they're working on together for the very first time. And they've had my copies of traditional home, not my copy, but I mean the issues that I'm in with my work as a template for what the client wants to have done, like sticky notes, and I like this, and they're using my design work as a template to do their home with this other designer who is white. And that's fine, but the designer is local, just like I am.
Right, it's not like somebody in California.
Right. If you wanted to, you had called me and I interviewed for the project and my price came in too high or we didn't hit it off and it wasn't a good connection and you decided to go a different route and then use my design as a inspiration for your work. But no, I'm literally right down the street. You didn't even call me, but you took my work.
And it's like, even if they interviewed you and decided that your personalities don't match, but they're not even open to the interview and the phone call because of the, like Keisha said the other day, the color of my skin. It's just like that's what it's
the color palette that you cannot change. I change color palettes for clients every day, but this is a color palette that I cannot change. And it's unfortunate because I think people recognize and admit that African Americans have contributed so much to this country. This country was built on the support of African Americans, and that was the country's original sin as far as how we got here. But beyond the actual slavery construction of the country and the horrific experiences that our forefathers went through and being, stolen and brought here to this country, African Americans have contributed so much in so many areas, and with space and astronauts, exploring, space, to breakthroughs in health and in medicine, to the arts. Think about music and how much, pop and R&B and rap and hip hop has influenced culture for everybody, white and black. But it started with our community. Fashion, bright, vibrant colors and patterns, those can be traced back to African roots. And we bring it here. And so we've contributed so much as a people to our country. And yet, unfortunately, we often are relegated to the least levels of respect and kindness and dignity. And I think this week kind of crystallized that for all of us, because I think Black people we're tired. We're tired. Yeah. And the way how I would I like to use my analogies, Luann. It's like a husband and wife marriage. Men and women are different. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? Women look at things in a completely different lens than a man does.
Right.
And a wife may express to her husband something that's deeply bothering her. And she keeps bringing it up to him over and over and over again. He's a guy, he doesn't quite understand. He doesn't have her emotional or physical makeup. They're two different people. But if he does not take notice of what she's saying, well, they say a happy wife makes for a happy life. If you don't take note of what your wife is telling you, you keep ignoring her and keep saying, well, I don't understand what she's talking about. I don't get it. That's her problem. She's too sensitive. She's too emotional. She's too this. She's too emotional. Okay. You have to sleep with that woman. She's taking care of you, or she might actually take you out if you don't take care of her.
And take her for a boat ride, Corey.
Right, exactly. And only maybe one of you come back, and maybe one doesn't come back. So I think it's the same thing with African Americans and our fellow Americans who may not be Black. So like with the husband and wife, other races may not understand exactly what it's like to be a Black person. Just like a husband may not know what it's like to be a woman and her needs. But if the woman continues to express her desires and the husband continues to ignore them, you're going to end up in divorce. And that's the point where we're at right now in our country. We are like that woman. We are emotional, we are angry, we are upset, and we have a reason to be so. And we're trying to get callous people, in some cases, who are not listening to understand our point of view, to understand our plight. We're strong. Women are strong. And so I'm using that analogy to say, don't underestimate the strength that African Americans have. But we don't want revenge. We don't want to get back at anyone. We're not looking for, trying to take people out. We just want equal treatment. We want the marriage to work because we're all stuck here together in one household, in one bond, and we want to make the marriage work. But we need our mates to listen to what we have to say.
I love the analogy. I think it's a perfect one. And you can relate to that tired, where it's just like, it's, what, if I got to keep schooling you on this, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like I've said it every which way, right? Yeah. But it occurs to me that I would love for you to start to think about, just my advice, it hit me, that maybe if we frame the analogy in terms that the typical deaf person can hear it. So the thing is, we're making the analogy to the husband who doesn't hear the wife. But let's figure out what the husband, that white guy, feels unheard in. Right? Because in that analogy, the woman and all of the people that feel like, I get that, like I've been there, I understand that, whether I'm white, black, whatever, I get that. But it's the established, older, white politicians, the people who rule the world, that rarely experience that feeling of, I can't do something I want to do just because somebody else said no. So it's like my brain goes, okay, so what do we want to say? Is there anything that the privileged white established person, man or woman, struggles with, that we could say where he might, or she, that even, I'm not even just going to say it's white men, it's established, it's the power, right?
Right.
Would you agree? It's the power. It's just the
power. It's the.
I mean, at the big level, of course. At the street level, any person like that woman disrespected you. You know what I'm saying? But I'm talking about for big change. Big change has to be with the people who run the world.
Right. They make the decisions, and the thing is, the people can't complain about the weighty responsibilities that are going to come with needing to be more inclusive. Because at the end of the day, that's what privilege is all about. When you own everything and everything's at your disposal, you have a responsibility. Period. Dot. If I look at a fashion magazine and I see a bunch of male models modeling clothes, most likely you're going to see 3 white men and 1 black man.
Right.
So throughout media, it's always disproportionately going to feature people of color, and the majority of the optics go towards people who are not black.
Right.
It's just the way how our country has been set up. It's systemic. It's institutionalized. It's just hardwired into our existence. So now,
another thing I noticed is it seems like, this is where I'm having my white lady moment all week. It's like seriously. Over the last 8 or 9 or 10 months, I don't watch a lot of regular real TV, right? You put on Netflix, you watch a show or whatever. But over the last 8 or 9 or 10 months, I feel like more and more often the commercials are interracial couples. But it just, this second, hit me. 6 months ago, I'm like, oh, that's great. We're seeing more but why do we still need the white spouse in the commercial for Pepsodent? Like that, it's like that layer, just had that moment. I'm like, we have more television shows that center around black culture and black families, but the people who run the studios are feeling really good about themselves because their toothpaste commercials have a black and white couple. How about your point? Why?
Yeah, it's throughout the entire, it's everywhere. It's woven into our society at every level, in media, in politics, in social issues, and interior design. Every area that we're noticing in our world is affected by these basic parameters that have been set up for a long time. There are a lot of people making a lot of improvement. I think about the Marvel films, the superhero films. They have so many people of color at the forefront because they understand, and those comic book creators, Stan Lee, from the very beginning in the 70s, always had people of color taking the lead with these different, comic book series. But it's taken a while for people to kind of come around and to apply that same principle in other areas. So I think right now, this week, these last 12 days, it's been a crystallization of the anger and frustration and heartbreak that African Americans are feeling. I think that for the most part, we're tired. It's not that we don't want to talk about race. We're happy to do so, but we've been talking about it for so long, and we're exhausted. When Colin Kaepernick was kneeling at the sports games, he was derided. the president called any NFL player that was kneeling a son of a bee. And then he put pressure on the NBA and the NFL and all the other sports organizations to ban kneeling. So we can't kneel, we can't march, we can't vote, we can't protest. You gerrymander, you move things, you make it hard to us to get to the voting polls. I mean, Black people have tried every which way from the 60s back and from the 60s forward to get our feelings out there. And I'm encouraged to hear people really, I think it's finally, I'm hoping it's finally getting through. The challenge at this point will be to keep the momentum going and to keep the conversations going. And most importantly, to affect legislation on a myriad of different levels to actually improve the lives of African American. Like I said earlier, we don't want revenge for what's been done in the past. We're focused on what we're going to do for our futures and our present day, reality, and most importantly, for our children. We want our children. That's the promise. The promise that MLK was talking about. The promise was for Black and white children to coexist in harmony. We want that for our kids. We don't want our kids being snuffed out by the time they're 18 or 19 years of age because they're walking down the street with a hoodie eating Skittles. We don't want that. And that's what's happening. And we can't, between the Trayvon Martins and the Eric Garners and the George Floyds being snuffed out, and then everyone else being put in jail for the most stupid of offenses that other cultures are not put in jail for nearly the same level of offense. Like you'll see a man get caught with marijuana, Black man, he's put in jail. A white man gets caught with marijuana, he gets a citation or gets some sort of slap on the wrist. They put so many Black men in jail. And that's why between having everyone put in jail, all these Black men put in jail, you're shooting all the other Black men, it's a genocide of our race.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Who can help?
Let me ask you something about that.
Sure.
So it's what I find and I shouldn't say what I find. I don't study this. What I suspect often is, and I have said often, your biggest detriment if you get arrested for something that you maybe is either a minor offense or you haven't done.
Sure.
So I'm not talking about if you're full out, should be arrested and
right.
no matter what, whoever you are, right? But your biggest detriment is, I shouldn't say your biggest. What I know is a very big detriment is if you are not with means, if you do not have money,
lawyer,
and you do not, you see. So it's like, to me, I don't need to wonder. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have a place for this conversation as so much. But the thing is, I would imagine if you took 10 young men that were white and were poor, and 10 young men that were Black and were poor, and 10 young men that were white and had means, it's only the 10 that have means that are probably getting off more often than the Black kids are. So now maybe there's still a disproportionate there that's happening on other levels of racism, but it's the money and it's the ability to hire the lawyer who works the system and figures out the way. And so that's a double whammy of racism there, of being of color and being poor.
Right, but it also works the other way too. I live in a very wealthy area in Michigan. I drive a nice Mercedes SUV, a Jeep. I get pulled over all the time, and I'm not speeding. Oh. They don't see, and that's the point that I was making on my Instagram yesterday. They don't care about what you're driving or what you're wearing. What they see is this. And that's the point.
What happens? How often are you getting pulled over for no reason?
Regularly. I had one cop pull me over a few months ago, and he said, "Are you lost?" I'm like, and that's actually happened a couple of different times. They'll ask you, "Are you lost? Are you from around here? Are you? What are you doing in this area?" I said, "I live here. Can I see your driver's license?" "Yes." And one time, a police officer said to me, "Well, wonders never cease." Because he saw my Bloomfield Hills address. So it didn't matter that I was not speeding. And I asked him, why did you pull me over? Oh, we're just doing little checks. I thought you might be lost, but clearly you're a resident here. Have a nice day. That's racism.
Of course. I mean, he all
you
but said you don't belong here.
Right. You don't pull me over unless I'm doing something wrong. The light's out, or I'm speeding or doing some sort of infraction, then you pull me over. But I'm driving the speed limit. I'm very aware of where I'm at. Whoops. Can you see me? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm very aware of where I'm at. And so I'm much more careful about making sure I do not speed, because I know I'm at risk if I get pulled over. And I'm still pulled over. And I'm not driving a car that's torn up or has a light out in the back. I'm driving a very nice car so they can tell that clearly I can afford a lawyer. It doesn't matter. What he saw was a driver who had this profile, and he pulled me over to see if I was lost. That's code for, what are you doing here, boy?
What are you doing here?
What are you doing around here? Right.
Right.
And what happened to Aubrey back in March, he was jogging, just jogging. And they hunted him down and shot him because they didn't think he belonged in that neighborhood. So it's not, so I want to correct that thinking about, it's not, money is part of it, but you can have money and still be turned down. You can be successful and still go up to the woman's house and she be shocked and still turn you away. At the end of the day, this is the problem.
You know, it's funny, Corey, because it's reminding me now, and my husband, you know, is listening and here on our conversation, and I'm going to curious if he remembers this as well. Our son is a gay man, and he had a relationship for almost 15 years with a Black man who we adore and love. And, you know, I'm just texting with him all week with all this going on. They're not a couple any longer, but he's part of our family. And they were here one summer about 5 or 6 years ago for a weekend. And we live in a regular suburban New Jersey neighborhood outside of New York City. I'm not in the hills. I'm in the cosmopolitan area. And I'm just remembering they stayed at our house for the weekend, and they came in on a Thursday night. And so Friday, Vin and I went to work. And I'm just remembering that night at dinner, they were both Matthew, our son, was outraged. And Carl, our son-in-law, was just like you. He was just like, you know what? It's what happens. And what happened was they were out of our townhouse development, went for a walk. We're on one block outside of our townhouse development. And they saw a woman on her porch get up, go in her house. They didn't think anything of it. Like 10 minutes later, the cop came pulling up. What are you guys doing? They're like, we're out for a walk. Well, what are you doing here? What are you doing in this neighborhood? Like, I completely had forgotten about that. I mean, we were outraged and upset at the time, but it's that forgetting. It's like, okay, and we go back to our life the next day. That's the mistake that we've been making. Like, we have to not forget that.
And
you know what I mean?
Right. And to build upon that point, one of the questions I've been asked the most, well, not the most, but in several situations, I've had a number of people ask me online, well, aren't you concerned about the inner city crime between Blacks and Black on Black crime? Aren't you concerned about that? I don't know why people continue to divert from this issue to the Black on Black crime, but let's talk about that. Absolutely, we're concerned about Black on Black crime. But Black people want to expand. They want to grow. They want to enjoy the American dream. They want the house with the white picket fence in front. They want all the things that everyone else has as Americans in this country. But when we are outside of the project or the hood, the tough areas, and we're driving around, what happens? What are you doing here? Why are you here? How does that make me feel? I'm a taxpayer in this city, all right? I earn my keep, and yet you're making me feel unwanted and unwelcome in my own neighborhood, and I'm a Black man. So you have people who are systematically trying to keep people under their knee, if you will, in a social way, as far as keeping them either in jail, dead, or on top of each other in rundown neighborhoods that need support and financial aid. And then those of us who are able to expand and grow beyond that neighborhood, we're constantly told, you shouldn't be here, go back where you came from.
Right.
So across the board, what needs to happen is some people need to realize we need to share. We need to share what we have. We need to recognize that if they move in, the town's not going to go to crap. We don't need to have a flight out of this area because they're now here.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what happens.
Right.
The bottom line is there are people who don't want to share their space with other people who don't look like them. And they continue to move and migrate or put up bulwarks to keep people out. And the few of us are able to move in, they make us feel like we're unwelcome visitors in our own neighborhoods, in our own industries, at our places of employment.
Yeah.
It's systematic across the board.
Yeah.
And I think that this week has been about letting the world know that the pain and anguish that I think white people rightfully felt in seeing that video, seeing that man's life drain out of his body, we feel like that all the time.
Yeah, I know.
All the time.
Oh my God, I know, sweetie.
All the time. It's those tears are there all the time. We don't get a break. We don't get to change the channel. We don't get to flip and go to a different Instagram page. We don't get to hang out with our friends and just, change the subject. This is our reality, and we're just tired. We're tired.
It's the thing of it is I can't fathom it because it's like you were born in Italy instead of America. You were born with a color and a different, that like you have no more, like it shouldn't matter anymore, but by geography, by color, like, you know what I'm saying? It's just arbitrary. It's just arbitrary. It's an arbitrary thing. It's like blonde hair, blue hair, like it's just unfathomable to be judged.
Right.
Like, I know, like I really, you put me back to when Carl experienced that right in our neighborhood. And he just had this, you know what, Lou, it happens all the time. And I was like, Carl, how? And it was just, and I remember we were like, that couldn't have been. This is, 2020, like that couldn't have been. And it was.
Yeah. I think I had a good conversation with one of my friends. He happens to be Jewish, and he was talking about how this week affected and impacted his heart. And he was saying that, Corey, my people, my family, my forefathers moved here, to get away from the effects of the Holocaust, which was a terrible point of our history. And he said, when we got here to the States, because we were white, we were able to change our name. We were able to assimilate, and we were able to accumulate wealth and grow and pass down generational wealth from one family to the next because we were able to change our background to fit our new circumstances. He says, it hit me this week. Your people were stolen from Africa and brought here. And you didn't get to change. You don't get to switch. This is not makeup. It doesn't come off. I'm sorry I'm so emotional. It's a rough week.
It's okay. It's okay.
But the thing is, it hit him. He says, wow, you have to just be who you are. You have to be who you are all the time, and you now have to get other people to accept you for who you are. And other people don't have to work that hard.
Who you are is enough. That's the crazy part. Who you are is enough.
Yeah, it should be. It should be enough. That's the hope. But that's not the reality. So the question is, how do we get hope to become reality? That's the challenge.
Well, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to let that lead us right here because I know that the best way to make an impact is to start in the tiniest spot. So we're going to start in this tiny spot of the interior design industry, right? So we've got Mulaney B and the Black Artist Designers Guild. We have you. I'm putting my voice into it. And, it's just like, it's so funny, Corey, because people that in my inner circle, my friends and family, they're like, and of course they see what's happening with the podcast now. And, gratefully our community is so involved and it's grown so much, but they were like, some people will say to me, I didn't know you were so interested in interior design. And I like, I'm going to let it all out, right? I don't care about the pretty, right? Like my thing was I wanted to talk about business. That's what I wanted to talk about. But the world didn't need another business podcast because you Google it, there's 200,000. And so, of course, our business, Window Works, is in the world of interior design. So my point in this is I went really niche small into the interior design industry. I still talk about business. I still know I can substitute interior design for bricklayer. And I get to fuel my passion, which is to help people run profitable businesses. But because I niche so tiny, it made a big splash in a little pond. So I want to give you that platform now. Talk to us about what do we have to do in the design industry? Because Corey, if we can make a big splash in the little industry of design, it can ripple out to fashion, to to the magazine and the media. You know what I mean? Like we're going to make this happen now.
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways we can do it. First of all, let's start with media. The shelter magazines, some shelter magazines like House Beautiful, Traditional Home have done a really great job in showcasing people of color. They gave me front cover stories, which I was incredibly honored by. And those editor-in-chiefs there, they are very much, conscious about including everyone and looking for ways to diversify. But there's other magazines who I feel could do a lot more to show inclusion. I think of, for example, Architectural Digest. They feature people of color as clients, but I have not yet seen really designers being, frequently featured in their magazines in terms of the talent. And when the big time celebrities and NFL stars and NBA players, they're never going to discover African American designers if we're not featured in the magazines that they read. So I think the platforms are doing great, and other platforms could do a lot more to really show diversity in their ranks as far as their editorial coverage of the community. I think I look at some of the manufacturers that are out there that may have designer collections. Some do have a few designers, one or two that have a collection, but there are many who they have a long line of designers who are in their portfolio of designer collections, but they all look the same. There's no diversity there, So, but yet the designers who are purchasing the products and they are getting the light fixtures and they're getting the furniture and they're getting the fabrics and they're picking up the magazines and they're getting the subscriptions, it communicates a message to them when they don't see anyone that looks like them that this is not an industry that really wants me to be here. It's like living in my neighborhood here in this part of Michigan, surrounded by another culture who looks different than you, and you feeling like, okay, you can be here, but what are you doing here? And just so you know that we really prefer this group of people, we're only going to let you see these people walking around the neighborhood. We're only going to show you these people in our magazine. We're only going to show these people on our roster of design. So I think that there's some effort that could be made to really diversify that. Speaking panels, same thing. And obviously, when I say this, I'm not saying tokenize African-American talent either. If they're not qualified, if the house is ugly, or if the designs are not good, don't just feature it just because they're Black. But if they're qualified and they have a worthy contribution, maybe put them out there just because inclusion is very important. And for people of color, it means a lot when they can see themselves reflected in the industry that they're part of and that they support. So I think we've come a long way. I think even just in the last 10 years, I've gone to High Point Market, twice a year, every year for the last, several years. And I have seen more and more every year, people of color, African Americans, Latinos, everybody, just Asians coming in, Indian folk coming in. So I'm loving the diversity, but that's pretty much where it stops. We're not seeing it in the media and in the focal points like I discussed. So think again like that magazine I was telling you about, that fashion magazine for men's fashion. If
Yes.
you have 4 models and only three are white and 1 is black,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely commercial.
What is 2 white men and 2 black men?
Right.
Why
How
can't
hard
we?
is it? How
Why
hard is it?
can't we share?
Right.
That's
Right.
all we're asking for is to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the challenge.
So, so the thing is, I'm curious for you personally, right? Because, I guess, would you, I'm, how am I going to say this? So, for instance, however many years ago, maybe there wasn't as much opportunity in the design industry, and I'm really am talking about the markets too, because
Sure.
I see that the media is different, right?
Right.
But I come into this 4 years ago, and to me, you've always been there. You've always been Corey Damen there. Like, it wasn't
Right.
like, oh, okay, all of a sudden you're there. And I wonder, like, have you had that experience of being somebody that has been invited to speak and invited to panels and you had the line with Leathercraft and all the different things. Have you had that experience, Corey, and saying to yourself, okay, I'm here, where are my buddies? And little by little seeing more and more, or like, tell me about that, because you are there. And, or are you like, okay, I'm here, but maybe you can think of contemporaries that are white that are in 4 times as places than you are. So I'm curious your perspective there.
Well, I think that when I look out of these eyes, I don't see my face, or I don't see anything unless I put my hands in front of my face. I don't see my color on my face. I'm just looking out, right? So if I go to an event, a gala, a dinner, some sort of, design industry event, and I look out of my eyes and I see a room full of all, white colleagues, then that means I'm the only, raisin in the bread, if you will. You know what I'm saying? I'm the only person that's in that space. They may be looking out from their eyes and see a sea of people, and I stick out. Yeah. And I represent the diversity. Well, that's not really diversity. That's just one person of color. And the other persons of color, maybe they're serving, drinks and food. So that doesn't really count for diversity.
Right.
There needs to be more of a mixing of qualified designers of all different races at these different events, because that shows that the industry is welcoming those individuals into the fold, because they deserve to be there like everybody else. Yes. So, it's...
How about at the show house level, Corey? Are you aware at the show house level, is there more diversity, or do you feel like it's more like AD, where it's like hardly ever? Do you have any sense of that? I see.
It depends upon the show house. But yeah, I think show houses have done a pretty good job of featuring, or at least inviting people of color to get involved. I'll say this though, with show houses, there's not as much of a sacrifice though for the show house who is hosting the project. The designer has to come out of his or her pocket to pay for that. Right. So I'm not sure I would really count that as really, it's good that they're inviting people of color to be part of it. That's wonderful. But I want to see the situation where the host has to actually financially invest in some sort of venture to include people of color, where the choice that they're making actually is one that they have to live with. If you bring in an African-American designer to do a room in a show house, that's great. It does show diversity. But at the end of the day, what you really need is for those rooms to be decorated. You need people that are willing to shell out $10, $15, $20, $45,000 of their own money and their own company's money to decorate this room. So it becomes down, it comes down to volume. We need participation. We need people, as everyone, because many designers are going to turn it down and not want to do a show house because of the fees and the costs that are involved. And then you have other designers who say, I need the exposure, I'm happy to do it, and they come to the plate. Well, if those African-American designers are coming to the plate and participating in the show houses and doing their best to support the initiative of the show house, why does it stop only at the show house? Why are they now being invited to that same magazine's, High Point Market dinner party? Or why is it only when you need the designer to fork out his or her hard-earned cash to support your initiative that they're invited, but then I'll go to these different events and I'm the only one there. Why, it's, and I don't think, I will say this, Luann, I don't think that people are conscientiously thinking that way. I don't think people are deliberately trying to keep people of color out of these different events. I don't think it's thought through on that level. I think people just put together the list of those who they know and they invite those people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that brings us back to the topic of sharing and expanding beyond our bubble, to expand beyond the neighborhood, to be willing to cross the street to the other neighborhood and say, hey, you know what? Come join us for a picnic. Come join us for dinner. Come, I want to learn about you. Instead of only going to the same guest list that you've always counted on, that you know so well, and only keeping them in your circle. It's about people who are in power being willing to share their resources. That's the problem.
Yeah. It's funny. I think that I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I'm pretty lucky and I'm pretty grateful because of the podcast, I have this hour with each of you.
Sure.
So I'm thinking of Erica Ward and Ariane Belazar and Mulaney and, Veronica Solomon. Like, you're human beings to me because I've had this hour with you and I've really gotten to know you. And so because you know me, when somebody asks me to do a panel, my first question is, can I pick the panelists? Because sure. I like to pick my panelists and my topic.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's like always. And I'll do it if you give me the panelists and the topic, but my preference is, yes, can I pick the topic and the panelists, right? Because, and then what happens is I'm realizing that what I do is and the reason I always say to them, I want to pick the topic and the panelists, because I run through my Rolodex of all the men and women I've met through the podcast. And if they'll say, well, we kind of want the topic to be XYZ, you see, and I'll be like, okay, but let me noodle on it and let me flesh it out and let me give it a title. And they'll say, okay, but then I run the Rolodex. Who have I spoken to that speaks to that topic, you see? And so when you say the same people are doing the same inviting and it's the same guest list, I'm saying those people are at a disadvantage because they only maybe see you by Instagram or see you by something, but I've had the privilege to know you. And so I go, oh, we're going to talk about mentoring. Oh, so I need Cheryl Luckett. Okay, that's who I need. Oh, we're going to talk about transferring your skills from one career to another. Oh, I need Erica Ward. My brain goes to who impressed me with their knowledge of it. And secondarily, I could give a rat's, what, like what we had a construction panel on construction and big ticket items that Rebel Woods and Jay Poor wanted to do. And so we're like, okay, who's in construction? We're like, okay, Lori Maya, Elizabeth Scruggs. I'm like, Nicole White. Like, these are the people. You know what I mean? It's like, these are the people. And so I'm just in a little catbird seat because I do know you. You know what I mean?
We need more executives like you in the industry to take that same initiative that you've been taking and permeate the industry, with it.
But it comes with taking the time to get to know somebody so that you remember why you want to invite them to the party. That you don't just sit in your roster and go, oh, I've only got one Black person. Who else should I invite? It's like, who are the people whose minds that have impressed me, whether it's me or an executive? That's what I'm saying. It's like they have to come out of their office and meet people.
Come out of the bubble.
Come out and meet people.
And that goes to the actual human story. The reason why we have division in this country when it comes to race is because people separate and segregate themselves from each other. They stick to those who they know. Now, many of us are not like that, Black and white. There are many of us, most of us, I think, that actually are all about integration and sharing and working together as a coalition. Because as human beings, I think we figured it out that God created all of us equal. But there's still a sizable amount of people who default, and this goes for Black people too, that only want to hang out with Black folks, white people who only want to hang out with white folks. Can we get these people to mix and match and come together? And then, only then, I think we'll get to a point where discussing race relations is no longer a must-have thing. I know that for some designers, they have fear that they'll be blacklisted for talking about race. You know, they fear that they won't either get a client project for talking about it, that they won't get opportunities perhaps within the industry from licensing collections or whatever because they've talked about it. Because Black people are always concerned about being portrayed or being perceived as the angry Black man or the angry Black woman. Yep. We have absolutely every reason to be angry. But we're not.
It's so true.
But we're not.
Yeah,
what I was going to say, though, is that we may be angry, but we also are full of love.
Yes.
And we have a lot of devotion.
You're entitled to be angry. Everybody's entitled to be angry. Like nobody has like it's an emotion. It's a normal emotion.
Right.
You know,
and
but it's funny, Corey.
If you take away the cause of the anger, we won't be.
Right.
If you start including people,
but then you might be angry because your peanut butter jar is empty. Come on, like it's like, but it's like the point is that it's funny because I had an interview one time with a young lady, a young Black designer, and you know me, in the off air 15, 20 minutes, we're going to talk about what's our focus, what are we going to teach everybody today, let's figure on our angle and our line, and then what are the other things we want to make sure we bring out. And there was something, I won't remember what it was, but there was something in the off air conversation, and she said, you know, I'd rather not talk about that. And I said, okay, that's fine. Cause you know me, it's like I always say, it's not Maury Povich. I'm not an investigative reporter. Let's have a nice conversation. Right. And I said to her, it's okay. And I didn't even press why, because if you tell me it's off limits, it's off limits. But she followed up with, she said, that conversation tends to frame Black women as angry Black women. And I don't want to do that. And I remember thinking to myself, my goodness, this woman like has to censor how she's on a blasted podcast. Like it's a real thing. And the thing is, she was, whatever the thing is that we were talking about, maybe it was something that was happening in the industry at that time, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But it was like, I remember thinking, I don't know if any white designer would come on here and think that they couldn't be mad about something. Like,
why would they? Right. Why would they? That's not their reality. When I was posting on my Instagram these last few days about the things I've been facing, and we've gotten literally thousands of comments and you know, reactions about it. And so many of them were like, I had no idea. This never crosses my mind. This is never a concern for me, but it's a concern for me. And so that's why I wanted to mention that, because I think that executives like you who are reaching out and trying to get people involved, you may encounter African-American designers who may be hesitant to come on a podcast and talk about these issues because they're afraid they're going to get blacklisted. They're afraid they're not going to get opportunities. They're afraid that they're going to be judged. Sometimes we issue purity tests amongst each other. You're not angry enough. You're not militant enough. You're not Black enough. And then you have outside the community people saying, oh, they're so angry. So Black people have this very weird fishbowl that we're in.
This whole
dichotomy, right? And we're just done. We're just tired. I think that now we just want to move forward. We need to discuss what needs to be fixed. We want to see solutions, and then we can start focusing on other things. And the thing is, if a Jewish community was undergoing the same systemic racism, and they do sometimes face anti-Semitism, you know, I'd be as equally vocal on their behalf. If my Latino ex-brothers and sisters were facing the same type of prejudice, and they do, kids in cages, whatnot, I'd be equally vocal on their behalf. Mm-hmm. So it's not about Black Lives Matter more.
No, I know. I love when you explain
Black lives matter too.
Right.
That's all we're saying. White lives matter, but they don't matter more. And that's the key. They don't matter more. They don't matter most. They matter too. Again, share the neighborhood. Share, let people in, share. We're taught these very basic things in school. If you have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you split it in half, you give one half to your brother. You share. The struggle right now is there are people who are afraid that others who look different than them are going to take the entire peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't want the whole damn sandwich. I'm not even that hungry. I just want half. You can keep your half because you matter too. But I'll be damned if I'm going to go starving. And that's the problem. We're done starving. We will not starve. We will not take the scraps off the table. We will not continue to work our hearts out for equality and still get second best, because we know we're equal.
Right.
And that's where we're at. And all we need now is for people like you and others. Most of you guys get it already, but there's still a constituency of people who are in positions of power who make decisions that don't get it or won't get it. And that's where we have to all, black and white, brown and red, have to coalesce together to bring down that faction of individuals who are making it hard for all of us. Because here's the thing, Luann. Here's the thing. And this is what I was telling my Jewish friend. We were talking about the Black Lives Matter, and he got the point about why it's Black Lives Matter too. I said, if they are successful in crushing African Americans, my people, then they'll come for you. Next will be the Jewish folk, then the Asians, then the LGBTQ, then women's rights are on the chopping block. Then they're going to go after the Indians and the Muslims. We're all part of one human family. If one line of defense goes down, everyone's at risk. And that's what we have to understand.
And what would it be like? It would be absurd. Yeah.
But this is how it starts. This is how Holocaust began. This is how Nazis take over. This is how this starts. Is the extermination through social control and pushing people in different places. That's how it begins. And we're trying our best to stop that. And thankfully, we have people who are not Black who want to see a change. And that's encouraging. That's what Martin Luther King was asking for, was for people who were not Black to come to our aid and be allies. And we're seeing that groundswell. So it's very encouraging. It's just, I think now I would use one more analogy, Luann. It's like running a relay race. We've been running this race for a really long time. We really are ready to pass the baton to white people.
Yeah, you need somebody else to take a leg. Like, can I sit down and rest?
You take the baton.
Would you take a section?
Run with it. Right, you go run now. Because folks are like, what can I do to help? I'm tired. Here's a book. Read it. Go run. You can take it to talk about it with your white family members at the dinner table. Don't wait for us to bring it up. Talk about it with your coworkers. Talk about it with your family. Talk about it with your legislators, your senators, your congressmen and women. Bring it up to them. We've run our hearts out on this topic, and we just want to pass the baton to those who we know can take it to the next level. And if they can do it and come back around, then we'll pick up the baton, then we'll run some more. And that's how the human race actually thrives. Yeah. All ships rise in the tide.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
When I think back, so now, having this awakening and being a part of this, the country waking up in the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. If Carl were to walk down the street in my neighborhood today and come back and say, the woman called the cops and the cops said, what am I doing here? And, when he asked for my license and it was New York City, and then I had to tell him that my in-laws live 3 blocks away and they couldn't prove it and they were just questioned. Now, being the Luann today, what would be my move? Would my move be to call my police department and say, what happened? Why did you feel that it was necessary to stop a biracial couple that are just walking down the street in our neighborhood? Like that's the move, right? That's the thing, to at least go to my police department and say, and it's not going to change anything. And the lady in the house is going to be scared and call again the next day. But am I calling them out on it? Is that what I'm doing, Corey?
What you do is you skip the police department and go to your attorney general. You go to your attorney general. The police we've seen that one of the problems is that police protect themselves. They cover for each other.
Yes.
They'll say to the press, the person tripped when you push the 75-year-old man down. Right. They'll say that, he had some sort of other asphyxia or some other problem. That's why he died with my knee on. No, you crushed his larynx with your knee for 9 minutes. That's what really happened. So they are known to cover for themselves. That's not to say that all cops are bad. I think most cops are good. But here's the thing, like a pilot. I don't need to have the majority of Delta airline pilots being good and there's a few bad apples and then only a few 747s crash. Some jobs have to have capable pilots and they have to all be good 100% of the time. So you skip the police and you write your attorney general. Okay. And you tell that attorney general, this is what my local police precinct did, and this is outrageous. And you get your friends to write her or him. And then those.
You see, because that's the thing, Corey Damen. That's the thing. It's like, it's one thing for you and I to have this conversation. It's one thing for us to, get people thinking and to share your views so that our eyes are open. But it is, what is the thing to do? Right? It is like, you can't just like, oh, that was a great conversation with Corey Damen, and then have my own son-in-law be, abused that way. And then just say, see, that's what Corey Damen was talking about. Like, so that's why I was like, what really is the next step? Because that's what we have to do. We have to start to take the next step when it touches our lives in just the tiniest ways like that. I'm sure his inner heart and soul were much more hurt than even we
of course
understood in that moment. Like, I remember we were sitting at the restaurant. We came home from, we met them after work, and they're telling us a story. And I remember thinking, that's outrageous. But now I'm getting,
he's numb.
God,
you get to be numbed by it because you get so used to it. I mean, I've been followed in department stores all my life. I've never shoplifted in my entire life. Never once have I stolen anything from a store. But I've had people follow me around, store managers, employees, police officers, just because they didn't think I should be in Neiman Marcus or I shouldn't be in Saks Fifth Avenue. And it's like, I have a right to be here. But that's the reality. And after a while, it becomes hardwired into our existence. The goal now is to make sure we don't have our children grow up with that same reality. So you write your politicians. You don't go to the officers because they're going to just take your complaint and literally throw it away. They're going to just they're going to protect them because they're like they're a family as well.
Yeah,
they're a family, but you go to the parents. And in this case, it'd be the attorney general. You go to the legislators. You go to those people who actually can affect change, and maybe say, you know what? We've gotten so many complaints about this issue from your precinct. We're sending all of you to diversity training. We really win. You're going again because clearly you're not getting the point. That's how
I can understand that.
Change.
That makes sense. That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, Corey. I'm glad I asked you. So, listen, the other thing is just turning the subject to the markets and High Point and everything again. We got ripped off. We were supposed to have our fireside chat in April.
I know.
Yeah,
I got the call from the gentleman who said he wants to schedule it for October, but I don't know if we're going to still do that or not. I don't know. I said that, but
yes, I did too. So it was so funny because they had called me back in January or February and said, we'd love you to do something in the theater. And I said, oh, what? And they're like, well, you decide. And I'm like, what do you mean me decide? And he said, well, do you want to do a presentation? We had you here a year ago. You did a book signing and a presentation. Do you want to do a panel? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to do one conversation with one person. I said, I love you guys, ASID, I do, but every time you put a panel up, you put 5 people on the panel. I said, and it's so hard for me to get to the next level of information with 5 people on a panel. It's always like, top level, one answer. I said, and I said, I would do it for you. I'm never going to tell ASID National no. I'm never going to turn down High Point Theater, right? I said, but if you're asking me, I said, more than even doing a solo, I would love to get into an hour-long conversation with somebody like I do on the podcast. I said, and can we not do it on those silly stools? Can we have chairs? I'm like, it's High Point.
I can't get my bottle of water. It's like 3 feet below me. It's so annoying.
That's it. I'm like, it's High Point. There's furniture around, right? So they were laughing. They were dying, right? And I said, and I would love it if I could pick the person. And they're like, oh, well, we have a whole committee and this and that. I'm like, well, could I give you a short list? And they're like, okay. I said, can I give you my top number 1 person that I would love to do it with? They're like, okay. I'm like, Corey Damen Jenkins. They're like, we love Corey. I'm like, okay, so I don't need a short list, right? So, so we don't know because we don't know what's going to happen with High Point, but we are on their radar still, and we are because I spoke to Matt yesterday, and he just said that, with everything going on, Ashley and the whole market authority, they're just, my God, could you imagine trying to figure out to do it, to not do it, to how to do it? And of course, they've announced that they're doing it, but I think they're working about the date and stuff like that. But yeah, you and I are going to be in some comfortable chairs.
Yes, or maybe a sofa, but yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that that's the thing that I really miss High Point. Like I'm used to seeing everybody, and it is such a multicultural crowd of love. Yeah. And the designers there, they love each other, and it's just like a reunion, like a family reunion. And
don't you get energized again? It's like you see everybody, and your brain gets the new information, and even Vegas market, all of it. It's just so to be with everybody again. So I hope that we can do it in October. I hope that we can. Yeah. So, and of course we're intending to, and we're planning on it. And I like I said, if it's open, I'm going. So, that's how it is. Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be like 9 days this time.
Yeah. They're doing it in 3 waves and all of that stuff. So before we go today, what else is happening in Corey Damen land for what's on the horizon for you? How can we support you in the things that you have coming up, so that in turn it supports everything?
Well, I'm working on my first coffee table book with Rizzoli, and that is coming. That is almost done. We're very excited about that. Should be dropping very soon.
What an accomplishment!
Which I can't share. We have a front cover, which I also can't share, but I can't, because I'm under.
I know. I can't imagine. It's going to be gorgeous.
But it's really exciting. So I'm super excited about that. Working with a great team: Kathleen, Susie, and Caitlin, and Charles, and all the top brass there at Rizzoli have been so supportive. And it goes back to our original topic. There are companies who are, even before this jumped off.
Yes, right, because this has been in the works for a long time.
Right. Yeah. So I'm excited to see their support. And thrilled to be collaborating with them. I have a collection coming out pretty soon with Left Bank Art, which will be featuring my own work. So I'm excited about that. We signed a deal with Downtown Bedding, Top of Bed collection. That should be also dropping, hopefully in October. I also am working on a very exciting wall covering textile rug and accessory line with a certain very prestigious fabric house, but I can't release that name just yet because I'm under an NDA at this time. I'm gonna let them make the announcements. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and
I'm happy to hear that you have so many good things.
Stay busy. Leathercraft is doing amazing. The collection there continues to perform very well. Hudson Valley Lighting, the light fixtures there are continuing to do well with that brand. So I am blessed. I am happy. I am focused on the greater narrative.
Corey, you're such an inspiration. You truly are. You're such an inspiration. You're such a leading light in the industry. You are always positive, and you are always, just lifting everybody up. And I have to say, it's even more remarkable to me now knowing that not every day is just a happy day, that just coming home sometimes in your car can be like a slap in the face, a stomach punch. And so it's even more incredible that you do rise up and you do lead with positivity and light and hope and by example. And so,
not with fear.
Right?
Not with fear.
That's what I'm saying. It's even more of an accomplishment in my mind that I have known you this long and at this level, and you just never, ever you just are always love. And that's the truth. And so, I thank you for your leadership, Corey, because it's by example that we're all going to get exactly where you want us to be and where we need to be.
I appreciate that. And it is a risk. I have the same fears that many of my fellow Black and brown designers feel. Like when I'm doing an Instagram post that's not about a beautiful room design, I think I'll talk to my staff. Should I say this? Right. Should I do this? Will I lose followers? Will I offend people? Will I make them feel uncomfortable? Talking about race is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's because it's something that has to be fixed. But it's like getting a shot of medicine. When that needle goes in, it is uncomfortable, but the end result may save your life.
Yeah.
And I think right now we're going through the injection process. It's uncomfortable. We're all squirming. We're all kind of like, oh, I hate this. But the end result, if everyone lets the medicine just kind of take its course, we're all going to be much better humans. Because at the end of the day, we're not black or white. We're human.
Yeah.
We're all humans.
Well, and in that analogy, it's your, bedside manner. That's the thing. It's like, that's what I'm commenting on. It's to really have the depth of understanding of the day-to-day difficulties that you experience even in 2020, but that your bedside manner in teaching and showing and leading us is still with love and light. And that's just amazing. And it's what
hats off to you.
Yeah.
Well, hats off to you being I've always called you my Oprah, the Oprah of our industry. You're interviewing, top design stars and letting them express themselves and bringing the tough conversations forward. We need more of this. We need others to follow your example in grabbing the bull by the horn. I know a lot of different executives right now in the industry are wrestling with this. They want to do something. How do we do it? How do we not offend people? How do we not turn people off? If they're watching this podcast between you and I'll tell them, don't be so concerned about what other people are going to think if your heart's in the right place. If your motives are right, if they're pure, speak out. Yeah. I don't want to talk about race on my Instagram. I want to talk about pretty rooms. Right. But the moment calls for us to be the better and to rise. And so if you lose followers or if you lose customers, if you standing up for what's right makes you lose people, then they're not the right people, and they shouldn't have been in your orbit to begin with. So hats off to you for taking the initiative to have the tough conversations, for stretching the conversation beyond just one episode, but to keep it going through next year. That's the only way we're going to really see true progress is if we don't let the narrative die. If we don't let it die here, we can focus on women's rights issues and LGBTQ issues and Black and brown issues. We all can keep talking. We can march and chew gum at the same time on multiple levels. We can do this.
It's the truth. I love it. I love it. And I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so grateful to call you my friend. I'm so grateful to share the friendship with you. And thank you for coming on the show and, just doing this with me because, like I said, you're always like that, the first person that comes to mind in so many things connected to this show. And I'm just like, all right, let's get Corey. Cause I'm babbling.
I'll always be there for you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll always be there for you. Thanks so much for having me on the show. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll hopefully see you in October, if not sooner.
That's it. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
One more thank you to Corey. Thank you, Corey. I really, 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 really value your friendship, your time, and appreciate you coming onto this show and being willing to share these raw experiences that you've had and these very real experiences that you've had. And it is the only way we are going to make change is to really understand what the friend that used to sit next to us at a market that we have fun with and we laugh with and have no idea that this is the type of thing that happens when they go back to their individual businesses and worlds. And so it is enough. That is what we've said all week long. It has been the words, enough is enough. And so I hope that you'll join me. I hope that you will come every week and continue to listen to the stories and the observations and the lessons and the pain that our friends have been going through. Next week, we're going to have Kay Whitaker on the show, and I'm looking forward to hearing her perspective as a mother, as a wife, raising children in this environment. What does she go through? What does she think about? How does she talk to them? So that's coming up next week. And I also want to say a huge thank you to Kravit. Kravit sponsors the show from the very beginning. And when I think that so much of that first 5 or 6 months, let alone the last 4.5 years, was so really critically tied to their support and their belief in it and their commitment to the betterment of interior design businesses for you as an interior designer and the industry in a greater way. And so thank you, Krabbit, because without that faith back then, I don't know that we would be here now in order to do what we're doing now. So I want to invite you to continue to listen to the show. We will go back to regular programming for the next 2 days, the next 2 shows this week, and then every week we will be sharing these experiences of our colleagues. And I also challenge you to do as Corey Damen said, pick up that baton for him and for our other friends. Run a leg of the race, move it forward, bring it out, be willing to stand up and to talk and to learn and to change. Okay, so that's where we're at. I hope you'll join me in this movement to make this not just be a moment in time. It needs to be something that is still talked about in 2 weeks, in 2 months, in 2 years, until there is lasting and real change for our friends. Okay? So, I tell you every week, decide to be excellent. It's taking on a new meaning now. I mean it. Think about it. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at luannigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.